careful, for when people plan to be wicked, they plan from early.
Who said those words? Why were such words uttered? In 2001, my mother had to bring the police because right after I had painted my fence, the fake vet maliciously had my fence defaced with grey paint by his painter. In the presence of the police, while pointing to his fence, he loudly claimed that the fence took up his land. I was puzzled. Why did he make such a statement since he was the one who built the fence? What was he implying? The next workday, I immediately contacted the legal department of the National Housing Trust and told them about the situation. They assured me that I had nothing to worry about since I did not build the fence. If only they knew. As time progressed, I had a lot to worry about as the extortionist executed his plans. As quickly as possible, I set out to obtain a copy of the engineering drawings for the property from the title's office. I recall clearly in the latter half of the 1990s when I came home and saw the fence being constructed. The fake vet said he did not know where the peg was, so he got a surveyor to survey the place, and he just went ahead and built the fence because of his dogs. At the time, I had no knowledge of the Dividing Fence Act. I was not aware of the legal requirements involved. So, did I resign myself to ignorance? No. I went straight ahead and obtained a copy of the law, and this is what I discovered. It should be noted in some communities, there is no fence that indicates the boundary of adjoining properties. But under Jamaican law, when a dividing fence is erected, it can be a hedge, a bank, or a wall. The law recommends that before the construction of such a fence, if both parties are living on their respective properties, a written agreement should first be reached regarding cost and type of fence. If one owner is not living on his or her property, then the one desiring to build the fence must first put in writing a notice on the adjoining property. The cost of construction should be split 50-50. If an agreement is reached and one owner does not honor his or her side of the agreement, the other party can construct the fence and recover half the cost legally. But under what condition can the cost not be recovered legally? When there is a bona fide dispute regarding the position of the fence. Additionally, if it fails to meet the legal construction requirement. Any fence constructed should be aesthetically appealing, high enough, strong enough, and close enough to prevent animals to leave from one property and access the other. After obtaining the law from the Ministry of Justice, I went even further. I wrote a letter to the Gleaner columnist Craig Francis of A Matter of Land to verify my legal findings and to glean any additional information. The answers to my questions were published in the Sunday Gleaners over a period extended from July 19 to August 9, 2015. here is a section of the letter as published, and this is how Mr. Francis responded to my questions.
As we continue this week on this question, I dealt with the position of the fence 2 weeks ago. This should be on the registered boundary as determined or verified by a commissioned land surveyor.
Let me interject here with a response Mr. Francis gave to another writer with the same question, but who asked specifically about using 6-inch blocks to build the fence.
Being certain of the position of your boundary marks, you then can proceed with fence construction. The correct way to construct your fence is first to ensure that during the construction, the boundary pegs are not disturbed. Many persons have a habit of removing the boundary pegs during the construction of their boundary fences. This should be avoided.
May I emphasize here that the boundary peg at the front of the property was removed during the construction of the fake fence. Continuing with Mr. Francis' response.
Once the correct line is demarcated, the construction of your fence can be done 2 ways. You can ensure that the outer face of your wall runs along the boundary line. In this instance, the entire 6 inches would be contained on your boundary. However, because the fence, as the name suggests, is a dividing fence, then it is for both yourself and your neighbor. So having the boundary line run in the center of the fence is the best way to construct the dividing fence. So in the case of a 6-inch concrete wall, 3 inches either side of the boundary line is sufficient and correct in erecting the boundary fence.
Now returning to the responses to my letter.
This week I will look at the second part of the question. You asked if a neighbor can unilaterally construct a dividing fence. The simple answer is yes, he or she can. You are allowed to construct a dividing fence to secure your property boundaries without consultation with anyone. However, the fence must meet the requirement of the Dividing Fence Act. This states that a fence must be high enough, strong enough, and close enough to prevent ordinary animals other than pigs and goats of the kind kept on the one holding from trespassing onto the other. So as long as the person meets that standard, then they can erect that dividing fence. However, because you are liable for half the cost to erect the dividing fence, then you should have been consulted to see if what is to be erected is something that, one, you could afford, two, you think is okay aesthetically, and three, what you had intended to erect in the first place. If your neighbor had no intention of asking you for a contribution to the wall, then he can go ahead unilaterally. However, being a good neighbor would dictate otherwise. On the matter of him alluding to the police, that you were the one who constructed the wall is very unscrupulous of your neighbor. But don't put too much credence on that, as he has no way to prove that, while you will be able to prove that he did.
Previously, in part 1 of Who is my neighbor? The question was asked, what kind of person would contravene the Dividing Fence Act and then accuse his neighbor of stealing his land? Notice how Mr. Francis alluded to the type of person in the following comments. If your neighbor had no intention of asking you for a contribution to the wall, then he can go ahead unilaterally. However, being a good neighbor would dictate otherwise. 2. On the matter of him alluding to the police that you were the one who constructed the wall is very unscrupulous of your neighbor. So the kind of person can be seen as not of good character and unscrupulous. Let us summarize what was done in an interview.
Were you given notice at the time the proprietor was building the fence?
No, neither in writing nor orally.
Were you living at lot 300 when he built the fence?
Yes, I just came home and saw the fence building.
In your opinion, is the fence sufficient?
No, it is insufficient in the following areas. 1. It's not in line with the boundary peg. 2. As regards strength, the material used to build the fence is of inferior material, allowing easy access to my property. Example, during one hurricane, the fence was compromised and a man's black pit bull or Rottweiler accessed my property. At one time, his rabbit came on the property. As you can see here, it is cheap board that is rotting and he has holes in the fence. Even though he built the fence, he placed thick green plastic to hide his dog breeding activity that he has on the property. 4. The height of the fence is irrelevant because he has a noticeably concrete platform at the end that allows him to easily access my property and without being noticed. Thus, I found it necessary to install security camera. 5. After installing security cameras, he placed board to further hide his dog breeding activity and increase the height of the fence. But he did not increase the height of the fence at the back, thus indicating his intention to access my property at any time.
You mentioned that the proprietor of lot 299 started a malicious smear campaign regarding the fence.
Yes. Once my mother had to bring the police because he had defaced my side of the fence with grey paint, and he was saying in the presence of the police that fence take up his land, giving the impression that I built the fence. But as you can see here, just by looking at the design of the fence on both sides of his property, you can see who built the fence. The fence is cheap and ugly, and he has been doing everything to maliciously destroy and deface my fence and property. He even brought one of his female gang members to call me a parasite, implying that I was living off his property.
What is the distance between the back pegs of lot 300, as shown here in the diagram from the title's office? Exactly 12.016 meters, consistent with the diagram. This was confirmed by a contractor who measured the distance for me. Here is the first peg. According to Mr. Craig Francis, a commissioned land surveyor and Gleaner columnist, there are two ways of building the dividing fence or a fence associated with a peg. Either method A, the block should be in line with the peg but is completely on your side of the property, or method B, the block should center the peg. Note, this is not a dividing fence, as there is no adjoining property associated with this peg. Thus, method A was used. This is the second peg. There is an adjoining property associated with this peg, but as you can see, there is no wall at this peg. The peg is clear and conspicuous and exists up to this day. In building the fence, the proprietor of Lot 299 built the fence and did not use any of these methods as stipulated by the commissioned land surveyor. Instead, he built the fence some 79 centimeters or 31 inches away from the peg. He alleged he did not know where the peg was, so he just went ahead and built the fence. And this is only with regards to the back peg, as there's no front peg visible. This obviously was removed during the construction of his fence. Here the diagram shows the fence of 299, and it is 31 inches away from the boundary peg. Now, as regards the direction of the fence, it may have followed a straight path, or it may have followed some arbitrary direction. So, what do the words "be careful" for when people plan to be wicked, they plan from early means? Why would someone who constructed a fence approximately 103 feet or 32 meters long, involving steel, cement, and block, not wish to recover the cost? What additional information did I discover regarding the Dividing Fence Act? How is the laying of the foundation of the dividing fence the laying of the foundation of organized gang stalking? Why would it take an unscrupulous person who is not of good character to engage in organized gang stalking and extortion? To find out about the mathematics of extortion, please subscribe to Who Really Is My Neighbor? Contravening the Dividing Fence Act, Part 3.